The first question is Biden and what kind of mandate he has, and whether he will govern as a moderate or whether he will feel the pressure from the left of the party, the AOC, Bernie Sanders. How would you view that right now?
So my colleague Asma Khalid had a conversation with someone who had worked with Biden in the Obama administration, and he said that as Biden is naming people to his cabinet, that you probably shouldn't assume that personnel is policy. You know, in the Trump administration, in many cases, personnel was policy. Like, you know, you make Jeff Sessions the attorney general, and he's going to do all kinds of immigration related stuff. But in this case, this person who is in the know is expecting policy to be very White House driven and to be really driven by Biden. And that is likely to be disappointing to progressives. I mean, Biden did run on the most progressive platform ever for a Democrat, but he also ran as a moderate. And he's not going already. Progressives are upset with some of the staff hires that he's made. I mean, I think what Biden is aiming to do, as far as we can tell, is to have a well-functioning government, to try to break the fever with Republicans in Congress, which may or may not be possible. But he is desperate to try to work with McConnell and others to make things happen. And some of the most ambitious things he ran on are simply not going to be possible, or are going to have to take a back seat to getting us the heck out of this pandemic. And so, like, you know, the coronavirus is going to be all consuming, and the economic fallout from the coronavirus is going to be all consuming for months. I mean, certainly he's going to do executive actions very quickly to reverse Trump era executive actions on things like immigration and other areas, the environment, areas where he can try to reverse Trump. But he's going to be constrained in what he can do legislatively because of either the very close margins or because the Senate is Republican.
Yeah, I think your point about that is very important, because I know there was a lot of pressure on the Green New Deal and climate, and I do think that we'll go back into the Paris Agreement and we'll do some things, but it may be difficult for him to really go as far as the progressive wants, just because both houses of Congress are 50-50 basically.
Yeah, and I mean, he can reinstitute or begin the process to reinstitute regulations on greenhouse gas emissions, or to make sure that car makers follow through and actually do produce vehicles that are low emissions, or force power plants to make changes. He can do that through executive action, sort of reversing the Trump reversal of the Obama executive actions. But in terms of, a multi-trillion-dollar Green New Deal, that's going to be really hard. Now, the only way I can see him selling it, but it's going to be a hard sell to Republicans who, I am quite convinced, and Ted Cruz said this in an Axios interview, they are going to rediscover their concerns about the deficit very quickly. But the only way you sell a Green New Deal is as a huge jobs program, as like a, WPA jobs program.
Yeah. No, it is inconsistency. I think it was Groucho Marx once says, I'm a man of principle, and my first principle is flexibility. And I think you may see that on the deficit particularly. So I got several questions. Okay. One is, how do you and other media plan to cover Donald Trump once he presumably leaves office? How much do you think, and what do you think? Do you think he matters once he leaves, when he's not president? What he says, does it matter?
Well, I mean, we cover former President Obama when he gives a speech or when he writes a book. Everybody's interviewing him right now. We certainly occasionally cover Jimmy Carter, for instance. But we don't. Other ex-presidents have mostly been kind of quiet, and they've waited to talk until they felt it was absolutely necessary so that they could get the most impact from their words or their actions or their advocacy. And I don't know that we can count on President Trump to do that. I'm pretty sure we can't count on him to do that. So one thing I wonder is whether there will come a point when his shtick wears thin, or where, oh, former President Trump is talking again. Okay, so what? He's talking again. He talks all the time. I don't know exactly, and certainly if he is a candidate for 2024, or a declared candidate for 2024, then I think that broadly the media will do what they've done with other candidates, which is assign a person to cover the field, or, depending on the size of your organization, NPR assigns one person to cover the whole field at the beginning. Like all of the networks have embeds, one junior producer who follows the candidates around. I would assume that there will be people who are assigned to President Trump, but they will not be White House reporters. And here's another really important thing. Right now, when he tweets, there is a very big question of whether he is announcing policy. And sometimes, he's firing somebody. He's definitely announcing policy. Sometimes he is announcing policy that is not actually formulated yet, and then they have to sort of backfill behind him to figure out what he's announcing. When he is no longer president, his tweets are not announcing, there is no risk that his tweets are announcing government policy or American policy. They're just the tweets of a guy. So
like a crazy old uncle, maybe.
Your words. It changes the potency.
Okay, so we have a question here. Americans are so polarized that we can't agree on basic fundamental facts and trust legitimate reporting. How do we get more Americans back to trusting the institution of journalism and discerning fact from fiction? Do we need to teach media literacy in schools?
Okay, so how do you restore trust? I do think that media literacy is something that needs to be taught in schools. I also think it needs to be taught in homes, because there are way too many people who believe that memes are true, when in most cases memes exist to make you upset and want to share them. And they aren't based in reality, or they distort reality. There's so much in the social media ecosystem that is distorting reality for people, and a lack of news literacy. It's also, and I don't know how you teach this, but it's critical thinking skills. It's reading something, pausing, saying, does that make logical sense? Hey, let me go look up the statistics and see if this is even right. But people tend not to do that, or lots of people tend not to do that. So I think it's important to work with kids at a young age to help them figure out how to detect fake news and misinformation, and how to detect stories that are just there to make you angry, and not to inform. But in terms of what I can do, or what we can do, I think it's incredibly challenging, and all we can do, I think, is continue to do credible fact-based journalism that is fair, that puts the truth out there, and hope that we do it in a way that is entertaining and appealing enough to reach a broad audience, and to sort of break through the noise. But I would argue, a lot of people are concerned about, a lot of people on the left are very concerned about Fox News, or, like I was talking to a friend who is very concerned that her father is only watching Fox News and he's not taking coronavirus seriously, because of where he's getting his information. But I would argue that what is happening on other cable networks also has the impact of eroding confidence in journalism. And the sort of standard formulation of cable these days is a panel of people on set, or now in little boxes, and you'll have 3 journalists and a Republican, or 3 journalists and a Democrat and a Republican, but you're just going round robin. And the average person watching has no way of discerning the difference between a journalist and an opinion person. And they certainly have no way of discerning that, like, the journalist is just there to talk about facts, and being put in an oppositional position with a Republican only damages the journalist. So, I mean, like, basically programming on television is set up to degrade our credibility. Even if, as individuals, we go on and we present facts and we don't argue with people, and we are pure professionals. Even if we do that, just the structure of it degrades journalism.
Do you think that the demise of so much of local journalism has an impact? That is, all these newspapers have either been sucked up by somebody or gone under. A local television is actually, in some cases, pretty good. But a friend of mine ran for the state senate in Kansas, and state senators, there's 40 of them in the state. They're powerful positions. She told me there was just virtually no coverage, none, didn't exist. And so that tends to define democracy down a little bit as well.
Absolutely. And what form of journalism do people have the most faith in? They have the most faith in their local journalism, because they know the reporters, they're in their community. And also, it's incredibly important to shine light on what's happening in your community. But just as politics has become extremely nationalized and people don't focus on local politics, like, you go into the voting booth and you're like, I know who I'm voting for president, but who are these people running for city council and school board? I don't know. Local journalism is incredibly important. And as you say, so many small papers just can't sustain themselves, and have gone under, or have been bought up, gobbled up by conglomerates that either have viewpoints or are just starving them to the bone. And then you also have some local TV is great, absolutely integral to the community. And some local TV may be integral to the community, but it is part of a network of local TV stations that are owned by owners that have a viewpoint and are pushing that viewpoint out through local media, through local TV, in a way that, launders that trust.
What are some of your favorite news sources? And related, who are some of your favorite people to follow on Twitter? And who do you recommend that a group of people from a think tank, a center-left think tank, that we ought to be following in light of this very diverse population we have in the United States? And I might add, I got to mention this because of my involvement in rural and food and agriculture issues over the years. The urban-rural divide was just profound.
Yeah.
You looked at the counties in rural America that would go 8-1, 10-1 for Trump. And then, of course, you saw the reverse in urban counties. And one of the things we talk about at Aspen is, how can we talk to each other? How do we talk to people with different points of view and listen? And so the question goes back to, who do you listen to? Who would be the kinds of people that we role models in the world of journalism, besides yourself, of course?
Well, I also highly recommend my PBS NewsHour colleague, Amy Walter. She offers incredibly smart analysis on Twitter on a regular basis. In terms of news sources, I enjoy The Daily from the New York Times, which is a podcast, highly popular podcast. The Daily is great. I like NPR's Code Switch podcast is another great podcast. I'm on Up First all the time, so whatever. That's just endorsing myself again. And I would say that The Daily provides more depth, but Up First provides sort of a quick hit of news if you get your news in the audio form. I'm just a stereotype. I read the Times and the Post and the Atlantic and the New Yorker. But, you know, I also keep up with the Sacramento Bee and people, LA Times out in California, people that, because I'm from California and I keep up with California. And, you know, in terms of Twitter, I don't know what to tell you. I follow a lot of people. I follow congressional reporters. I follow a lot of Republicans of all stripes and Republican lawmakers and former Republican lawmakers and aides to Republican lawmakers. I try to have you know, I follow very pro-Trump people. I try to have a diversity of viewpoints in my Twitter feed. Obviously also following a lot of journalists and a lot of liberals who also have very interesting ideas. It's just, you know, a constant flow of junk washing over me, some of it good junk.
Well, you're in this business, but to average people who are not in this business, this trick about listening to people who just don't reinforce your own views. Anyway, Tamara, thank you so much. We're going to keep watching you. I hope you're on as long as you want to be.